It is I can start, right? It's 8:30. Okay, just making sure there's nothing missing. So it is a blessing to be with you this morning, a little earlier than
Es
yes.
una bendición. Oop.
Oh, how exciting.
I need interpretation channels.
That's fine. Oh, what a wonderful blessing to just have us all together with friends of different heart languages. Just give me like some kind of high sign. Perfect. Um, friends, thank you for making the time to be here and to see what the Lord will do among us. Um, I was sharing with Abby, who is traveling as an elder with me from my meeting, that we know that we rely on the Spirit because I think I got about 3.5 cumulative hours of sleep. Anyone staying in the hotel knows we had a fire alarm situation at 2:45, and it was so exciting because the fire trucks came and then more fire trucks came, and then they were like, get away from the building, there's a fire. And then they were like, no, there's no fire, you could go back in. So it was quite exciting. I sent pictures to my husband who was asleep. But don't worry, I didn't wake him up. He slept great. Um, but I say all that because we come as we are and we trust that God will provide. So, with that said, um, if we can have the gather the people together slide. So, yesterday, we read from the book of Numbers, and we read a passage that I will read now, um, just to kind of set the stage. And oh my gosh, don't say that. Abby said it's another fire alarm. Um, so the Israelites, and this is in Numbers chapter 21, verses 16 through 18. So it's a little bit truncated from yesterday. But the Israelites moved on and camped at Oboth, and then they set out from Oboth and camped in Eabarim in the wilderness that faces Moab toward the sunrise. From there, they moved on and camped in the Zered Valley. They set out there. They set out from there and camped alongside the Arnon, which is in the wilderness, extending to the Amorite territory. The Arnon is in the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. From there, they continued on to Beer, the well where the Lord said to Moses, gather the people together, and I will give them water. Then Israel sang this song, spring up, O well, sing about the well that the princes dug, that the nobles of the people sank, the nobles with scepters and staffs. So, yesterday we reflected on God's command to gather the people together before he gave them water. We reflected on the reality that some blessings can only be received as a gathered people. And we discussed the truth that there are cultural and spiritual headwinds that push against our coming together as that gathered people. And as I said yesterday morning, we are constantly being catechized by our culture, being taught its doctrine as we consume media and as we interact with others according to the pattern of this world. So a question came up. What is different about being a gathered people compared to what we're currently doing? And I thought about that, and I thought about that, and I met with Abby and Peter Blood, who is also serving in an eldering role, and we sat with that. And now we're going to talk about it together. So when we think about the doctrine of the culture, and if you could please go to the next slide, I'm going to say here, Peter mentioned this 2-year course that I'm co-teaching. This is literally, we're talking about it for 2 years. So this is a teeny tiny snapshot of a thumbnail of a Polaroid taken from a moving vehicle. Okay. But I want to offer it to you to set the table a little bit. So, as we consider, oh, that's a good, okay, it wasn't me this time. Um, as we consider the doctrines of an egocentric culture, of which is kind of how I'm shorthanding empire with our particular individualistic twist enabled by modern technology. As a footnote, this is why we're not even going there. Although, where's Wes? Maybe we'll go there this afternoon with Wes. So that will be great. But there are a few aspects that are particularly relevant, I think, to our considering what we may have already internalized and how it conflicts with the possibilities and images of being gathered together in the spirit. So one is an attitude of entitlement, entitlement to service and accommodation. It is the customer is always right ethos, which we carry with us to different domains of life. And you can, once you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. The professors talk about grade inflation because nobody wants to get an A minus. When we encounter people in service roles, oftentimes there's a sense of you owe me, and if you don't do things the way I deserve, oh, I'm going to speak to your manager. It's that attitude which we sometimes bring to how we approach our committee clerks or our meeting clerks or our yearly meeting staff. You owe me service. Another thing that we do is we prioritize drama and spectacle. It's showbiz culture. We love the drama of good versus evil, our guys versus the other guys, red versus blue. Just putting that out there. At the same time, part of the egocentric culture is that we will justify, ignore, or even participate in systems of exploitation that make our lives cheaper or easier or more pleasant. I don't even think about what my Uber driver is earning, when I decide that I'm going to summon my food instead of getting in my own car or picking it up or, God forbid, cooking, right? I just get in the app and some anonymous person whose life I don't know about brings it and goes home, putting miles on their own car, taking time from their own life to serve me. Those two things together, by the way, prioritizing spectacle and participating in exploitation, lead us to these amazing absurdities that you sometimes hear even among friends, where people will say, we can't deport immigrants. Who will do the jobs we don't want to do?
Traen a otros.
And so that drama of, oh, we're standing up for the oppressed because we want to keep oppressing them for our benefit is something that feels natural because we've so internalized the value systems. We talked yesterday about how nothing is so sacred that it can't be traded, sold, or taken by force. The partner to that is that the individual is the arbiter of moral value. And so, for example, if you go onto every year, the New York Times around the holidays does what used to be called the neediest cases. And they were these amazing stories of people striving against life circumstances for a better life. Well, if you read the comments, I don't recommend it, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. What you will have seen over the past 15 years or so is when you have that scrappy nursing assistant who's studying for her RN degree so she can feed her kids. More and more of the comments are, if you couldn't afford them, you shouldn't have had them. Why didn't you get an abortion? And why am I on the hook to pay for your offspring? Because the value of a life is determined by how much I want it. And so at the same time, and perhaps even the same people can take their dogs out. Oh my gosh, I looked this up last night because I didn't want to say something that wasn't true. You can take your dog out for a $42 steak in Manhattan, and that's fine because that's your choice. Okay. It's what a time to be alive. At the same time, we prioritize tolerance, non-judgment, except for our judgment, which we are perfectly willing to back up by force. I had a really fascinating conversation almost a decade ago with a friend who just casually said at school, at meeting, social hour, spanking should be illegal. My mother used to be a social worker. One of her jobs was taking kids out of abusive homes. So I said to her friend, you know that when you say spanking should be illegal, what you're saying is officers of the state should go take children out of their homes if their parents give them a swat on the bottom. Given that 97%, 92% of American parents will cop to having spanked their child on a survey, we can debate the honesty of the other 8%. Who do you think will have police at their door taking their kids away if we make this beautiful law that spanking should be illegal? It's going to be poor parents. It's going to be Black parents. It's going to be Hispanic parents. It's going to be urban parents. It's not going to be white parents in nice neighborhoods where the cops don't intrude, even though they're engaging in the same behavior. So there's this dichotomy of I'm the judge. Don't judge me, but I can judge you, and back that up with the coercive power of the state. So that's the table for the culture. So then thinking about the actual question, how do those doctrines manifest in spiritual community? I don't even feel comfortable talking specifically about New England Yearly Meeting, which I don't know well, or Friends in general. We are so diverse. But I'm going to offer two religious frameworks that are part of this egocentric culture. And then I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not there are any resonances with your experience. So if you can go to the next slide. The first one that I want to share is moral therapeutic deism. That's a mouthful. It is a mouthful. Just out of curiosity, has anybody ever heard of this? Okay, a few. Isn't it good to be among the elect, right? There's no reason you should have heard of this. But this was originally a phenomenon that was found in youth ministry. So this is kind of where this came from, and this is how they defined it. It's not like an actual religion, but it's a tendency. So the first is that God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. So far, mostly so good. The next is that God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. This to me feels very similar to or consonant with the idea that all religions are basically saying the same thing. And the thing that God wants from us is the thing that all religions are saying. Be nice, be fair, engage in reciprocity. The next tenet is that the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. So in the context of spiritual community, what that looks like is The primary characteristic that we're looking for in spiritual community is welcome, affirmation, a sense of feeling accepted and affirmed in our actions and identities. The next tenet is that God does not particularly need to be involved in our lives except when we have a problem to solve. So in this view, God is not an authority figure who is in a position to expect our obedience, but is more like the customer service rep that we call when we want a problem. So don't laugh at the people. Don't. Because this is listen, we had a tire blowout on the side of the road on I-95 last week before last. It's all blurring together. I was calling that customer service line. So this is okay. This is, human stuff. And then the last one is that all good people go to heaven when they die, irrespective of their religious beliefs or specific actions. So that's moral therapeutic deism. And again, I'm just going to let us kind of take that in for a moment, and you can decide whether or not any of that seems relevant to your experience of spiritual community. Can we go to the next slide? Now, the other doctrine that I want to put in front of you, and this is from a book called Habits of the Heart. It's written in, I think, 86, is Sheilaism. Okay, so this faith is Sheilaism. I believe in God. I'm not a religious fanatic. My faith has carried me a long way. It's Sheilaism, just my own little voice. It's just try to love yourself and be gentle with yourself and take care of each other. God would want us to take care of each other. Now, Sheila Larson is a nurse, and she said there's only one person in her faith, and that's her, which is why she calls it Sheilaism. But it's listening to a little voice inside that says, be nice to yourself and be nice to each other. So again, I'm not competent to make an assessment, but I invite us to reflect on whether or not this resonates with anything in our spiritual experience. When we are thinking about the silence changed, and I just want to name that. When we're thinking about what it means to be friends together, what it means to be a religious society of friends, it's worth thinking about how we talk about what is good in our faith. And we have some options for how we do that. Quakerism might be a faith that's so wonderful because no one tells you what to do. It might be a faith that's so great because you can be any kind of Quaker that you want. It might be a faith of good people who are seeking a community that is welcoming, non-judgmental, and kind, in which we can experience fellowship with others who share our spiritual priorities. We have a menu of spiritual priorities we can pick from and find affinity with friends who share them, and they might be social justice, the pursuit of mystical experience, environmental stewardship, political activism. And so we can create a bespoke experience based on our interests, needs, and inclinations, Find others who can share in that experience, regardless of the faith they confess, the God they do or don't believe in, where we can welcome and affirm each other in an environment of relatively low expectation. And when I say low expectation, just to be clear, because it's very easy to, I don't want you to overread what I mean, but we had a friend in my meeting who hadn't been around for a while, and I was like, has anybody heard from this person? And it was really interesting because someone in the meeting who had grown up Southern Baptist was sharing how she loves the fact that if she doesn't come to meeting, there's not going to be somebody on the phone calling and saying, "Oh, we missed you at meeting for worship." She loves it. And it's a wonderful thing to just have a zone of autonomy and movement without feeling like there are 1,000 people over your shoulder. And there's an assumption baked into that, right? The assumption baked in is that the reason that you're not at meeting is because you're tired or you're sick or you're doing something else, but you're not like dead in a ditch and your car didn't die and you're not sick and need of assistance. Because if you were in that position, not getting the phone call doesn't feel like freedom and respect. It feels like you don't care whether I live or die. So, to the extent that that is our view of what it is to be a friend, we can find ourselves saying things like, this is an interesting thing about the last pope, that Pope Francis is a Quaker and he doesn't know it. I want to name and recognize that statements like that are made in a spirit of love and kinship and finding common ground and recognizing that that there is one light that enlightens every person who comes into the world, regardless of their external profession. If they follow that light, they will know God and walk with God and know that the redemption in God. Okay. And it felt a little disrespectful of somebody who pretty much, I can say with a high degree of confidence, knew what Quakers are and chose to not be one. I didn't mean that as a laugh line, but it is like it's one of those things. So that is there. So we have this table, we set it with the doctrines of the culture, we put a few platters out of religious tendencies that are on that table of culture. And I want to offer a contrast. If we could go to the next slide. So this is an image of a gathered people from 1 Peter, and it was a long quote, so I picked and chose a little bit. But in case you were curious, it's chapters 1, verses 14 and 15, chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, and verses 9 and 10. Okay. So, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, be holy in all you do. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And so as well, let me just sit with that for a minute. You can go to the next slide, sorry. It's perfect. So as we consider this image of the people of God, holy, letting go of evil tendencies, freed from evil desires, set apart to declare God's praises, it's a little different from Sheilaism. It's a little different from Sheilaism, and it's a little different from the type of community that Sheilaism invites us into. Sheilaism, moralistic therapeutic deism, it is a mouthful, which invite us to seek in our community primarily individual enrichment versus seeking corporate faithfulness. One invites us to seek to be good people gathered with other good people who believe that people are fundamentally good. Which is all great, by the way. But it's different. It's meaningfully different from the goal to be a holy priesthood, declaring the goodness of a God who shows mercy to the unworthy. I thought I was a good person until I was 21 years old. And when I was 21 years old, I started teaching middle school. And I learned all kinds of things about myself. I learned that all the patience I thought I had, and the generosity that I thought I had, and the joy that I thought I had, and the cheerfulness that I thought I had, man, it was a finite resource. And those 13-year-olds got me to the end of it. And then I thought I was a good person until I was 23 years old, because that's when I'd been married for about a year. And it turns out domestic bliss did not rain down like manna from heaven. Somebody had to do the dishes. Everybody wanted everybody's time. And all of that love and sweetness and just winsomeness that's so important in the courtship process was not enough to keep the boat floating in the marriage. So even when we say we're good people seeking to be good and gather with other good people, my question is, are we? Because when I look in my mirror, I see someone who's trying really hard and often falling short of the glory of God. But I have a hope because I worship a God who shows mercy. And we're invited to come together under the headship of that God who shows mercy, even when we fall short, who shows grace, even when we don't walk our talk, who is always open to be a reconciler and a mediator and a redeemer who turns suffering into wisdom and heartache into holiness. That is not what the culture is serving. And so when we ask ourselves, well, how is this different from what we're already doing? What we're already doing won't get us to that point. Because if we look at that language of the Oh, perfect. The living stones that, as Peter says, are built together to form a house. If you think about how you get from stones to a house, there's got to be a structure. There's got to be an order. The stones have to relate to each other in a certain way. Otherwise, what you have is a pile. You don't have a house. If we can go to the next slide. That structure, that pattern for how we as living stones come together under the stone, chosen by God, rejected by humans. We have a word for that among friends, and we call that gospel order. As Annis Blika, a friend in North Pacific Yearly Meeting, she wrote an essay called Gospel Order, where she quotes Lloyd Lee Wilson, who wrote essays on a Quaker vision of gospel order. And he describes it this way. He says, gospel order is the order established by God that exists in every part of creation, transcending the chaos that seems so prevalent. It's the right relationship of every part of creation, however small, to every other part and to the Creator. That's an invitation for us to relate to each other. But I want us to notice something. And that is that if we're going to relate to each other, we've got to do it with a shared vision and understanding of what we are doing. So Blika continues this way. She says, in our meetings, we're called to be covenant communities accountable to the divine and to each other. In secular communities, we choose to be there among those people. But in a covenant community, we are first called into a relationship with God, and God gives us to one another and to the community. Our relationship with others is divinely mediated. Our relationship with God changes us, changes the way we live, gives a new order to our lives, and we cannot live that life alone. This is what it means to be a gathered people, to know that God has chosen us for a purpose, has given us to each other. We don't come together for our simple pleasure or our enrichment or even to feel good, but to be transformed together into a fundamentally new and different way of being with God and being with each other. The world trains us in exploitation, in self-centeredness, in violence, in addiction. But our gospel order, our sense of God's covenant, our spiritual technologies of naming gifts, submitting to each other's discernment, resolving conflicts, exhorting each other to righteousness, mentoring each other on the spiritual journey, naming where God is working, and naming where we're falling short. All of that is an invitation into new life that glorifies God and that testifies that the world's way is not the only way. That the kingdom of heaven is here, it is among us, and that those we walk alongside who are starving for something that is real can join us in that walk.